Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here. So this week we are going to talk about these Muslim empires. So that's what we're doing this week, and we're looking at chapter 16 in our textbook, and just a couple of hints to get you through this week. So this is the first assignment, or the first essay assignment, I should say, in this class, and I think we have 3 essay assignments. And the essay assignments are really easy, but it's critical you follow the directions to the letter. And I'm going to talk to you about that as we go through these reading notes. But if you are the kind of person that stresses out over essays, don't worry about this at all. This is going to be really easy. I tell you exactly what to do. I even have a sample essay ready for you. So we'll talk about that. But it's in this case, make sure when you do the textbook reading, cool, but also make sure you read my reading notes, because they really have all the answers for the essay within them. And there is also a sample essay and the rubric for the essay included in the reading notes in Blackboard. So important that you look at those this week. And so what we're talking about are these 3 Muslim cultures. And for those of you who are not steeped in the history of sort of this, 1500s world history, almost contemporary situation, these Muslim empires, especially the Ottoman Empire, I mean, they were the deal, man. They had large territories, especially the Ottoman Empire. And it's interesting to note that, founding fathers of the U.S., like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and others, Madison, Jefferson was even trying to learn Arabic because Ottoman Empire was something to contend with. And if you wanted to be a superpower, or at least have beneficial relations around the world, especially for trade, then you needed to be connected to the Ottoman Empire, in the 1700s, because it was still doing very well. The other thing to note as we go through these, and as you look at my reading notes, these empires, like the Ottoman Empire, I mean, most of you maybe haven't heard of it or don't really care. It's what's left of it is modern day Turkey, but that empire lasted 622 years. So, I mean, think about that, because the U.S. has only been around for 200 and change. So these empires are, like the U.S., the American Empire, or whatever we will be known as, times 3. They're big, very imperialistic, very theocracy-driven empires, and they're all Islam. It's all Muslim, and in the case of like the Ottoman Empire and the Safavids, it's Sunnis versus Shia, and we'll talk about that. So anyway, what we're going to do this week is we have this essay, and let me kind of go through the reading notes and the lecture first, and then we'll talk about the essay. So the things you want to take away from the reading is look at my highlights in MindTap, and then also my reading notes. I have everything in bullet points. And one of the things I want you to think about when you read about these 3 empires, don't worry about getting into the minutia, the dates and the names and all that stuff. It's really not important in this case. What we're trying to do here is find some similarities or differences between these Muslim empires, and maybe draw some conclusions about society in general and about leadership in general. So as you go through, and first you're going to read about the Ottoman Empire, it really lasted from about 1300 to the 1900s. I mean, after World War One, it was kind of starting to fall apart. But it's notable because one of the things that's cool about the Ottoman Empire, that I think is cool about the Ottoman Empire, is that they were modern for their day. They were very modern when it came to like artillery and military and their weapons. So they had a great command of firearms, like with gunpowder, so cannons, that sort of thing. And they were really the force for Europeans to be reckoned with. And if you know anything about the ancient part of world history, Constantinople, which is Istanbul today in Turkey, Constantinople was, sort of the second outpost of the Roman Empire way back in the day, also known as the Byzantine Empire as it applied to Constantinople. And so the roots of Constantinople are with the Roman Empire, which is a pretty big deal. And when the Ottomans overthrow Constantinople in 1453, they really established themselves as a force to be reckoned with. And then they work north into the steppes, and they work over to the west into Europe. And they're Muslim, but at the same time, because their area that they control has gotten so large geographically, they have to be accepting of other cultures, other religions, other nationalities, and one of the things to take away from the reading, and it's really what the essay is all about, is what are these things that the Ottoman Empire had in common with the other empires, for example. So one of them is this diversity and inclusion. And egalitarian standards, especially when you read about the Ottoman Empire and how women are viewed in the Ottoman Empire, and the same with the Mughal Empire. You see it's a very tolerant or liberal type situation in society. So pay attention to that. Again, in the Ottoman Empire, they were Sunni Muslims. There was a sultan. They practiced Islamic law, Sharia law, but sort of a less strict version of it. And they had a big army, a big military. There were two really strong leaders for the Ottomans, Mehmet II and Suleiman the Magnificent. And in all cases with these three empires we're reading about, one thing you should take away is that they all had strong leadership. So if there happens to be a question on the essay about things they had in common, strong leadership would certainly be something that I would consider. The Ottomans are the longest lasting Muslim empire of the ones we're reading about right now. And I think that when you look at it, you see how they defeated the Safavids, and they went to Cairo, and they were basically establishing themselves all around the north, and especially the southern part of the Mediterranean. So the Ottoman Empire is a big deal. They were a really big deal, back in the 1500s, 1600s, the era we're studying, and they were great for trading and spices and the Silk Road and a lot of science and a lot of incredible artwork and architecture. So if you see these exhibits on MindTap where it says, hey, go to this arts exhibit, you should always click on those. Even if you just look at one picture, it'll kind of give you a feel for how people dressed and the deal there. So that's the Ottoman Empire, which is today basically Turkey. And then the second empire that the book talks about, and I'm a little disappointed because the book doesn't give much coverage to the Safavids at all. But really, we're talking about what is now Iran. So that's the second great empire in these Muslim empires, and the difference between the Safavids and the Ottomans and the Mughals is that they're Shia, so they're a different sect, if you will, of Islam, and a smaller sect of Islam, and in some ways more strict, but also they differ in the way that they interpret who the natural leader of Islam is. So there's a video I have on Blackboard for you, the difference between Sunni and Shia. I think you should know that. I don't think that I or the video gives the subject the attention that it deserves. But since this is a basic, history course, and we're trying to cover a lot of stuff, we're just trying to touch on it so you understand that there is a difference, and that exists today in Iran. So that's a big difference between Iran and a lot of the rest of the Middle East. So there's that part. The Safavids, again, Shah Ismail, the first Shah of Iran, basically was the strong leader. So there's a commonality between these other kingdoms or these other empires. And again, they were excellent with artillery and modern firearms for their day. It's the difference really between the Safavids and the Mughals and the Ottomans is that they're sort of more landlocked. And the book concludes, and I agree in a lot of these cases, the fact that these empires didn't have sea power and didn't have these natural ports out to the ocean was certainly something from a military and strategic standpoint that held them back. So there's that. I'm a little disappointed, as I said, in the book's coverage of the Iranian Empire because there's a lot to learn there that the book leaves out. But at least understand that they were one of the great Muslim empires of this period of time, 1500s, and also we read about Peter the Great in our last chapter. I mean, he was one of the guys who came into the north, into Iran, and really started to accelerate the decline of that empire along with the Afghans. So there's that part. Check it out. There's a map. I think it's map 16.2 or something, and it kind of shows you the area. But we're basically talking about modern day Iran, and a lot of these traditions and traditions of worship and traditions of Sharia law haven't changed that much from those days. That's the roots. It's similar if you're an American. Our roots are with the Puritans and the separatists and the capitalists and whatever else. That's the roots of Iran, is this Safavid empire. So there's that. And then finally the Mughals. And the Mughals, that's another huge empire, not as long lasting as the Ottoman Empire. 233 years, as most of you know, in the late 1800s, the ultimate in colonization. Britain comes into India and basically takes over this huge country. So that's sort of the end of the Mughal Empire, technically. But prior to that, the founder, Babur, was a descendant from Genghis Khan. So, had this incredible lineage. And basically, the Mughal Empire, we're talking about India and Pakistan today. So that's sort of gets you rooted in the geography of what we're talking about. And again, with the Safavids and the Ottomans, very into modern artillery, and the different thing about India that there was a grand mix of Hindu and Islam there, and so Akbar, who was the son of the original founder, took over, and the empire, grew, and he was tolerant of Hindu people or non-Muslims to some extent, and in both cases, like Ottoman Empire and Mughal Empire, both of them were tolerant of non-Muslims, but people who weren't Muslim would have to pay an extra tax to support the empire. So there's some things like that to check out that are commonalities between all of these empires. The cool thing about the Mughals, when you get into that part of the chapter, which is like, I don't know, 16.3 or something in the chapter, it's got a picture of the Taj Mahal there, so you see how opulent and how amazing the architecture was. And India's an interesting story because they were invaded or attempted to be colonized by so many European powers, including France for sure, and Portugal, of course, in Goa, and then England, of course, also, and that ended certainly 1876, and that ended when we get up to the beginning of the 1900s, so, and the World Wars. So check it out. These are three great cultures, and I know that for some of us, it's like, why do I need to know about these old Muslim empires? But A, they're not old, and B, at least in two cases, they're older than the American Empire, or whatever the United States is going to be known as. And they're really interesting, and they're all still in place in some way, shape, or form. I mean, India is its own unique place. Certainly Iran, modern Iran, is as well. The Republic of Turkey after the Ottoman Empire. But these are important histories to understand where we're going from here. And it's a good read because I think it's brief enough to give you an overview, but not so much that you get tired of it. So again, when you do the essay, follow the rubric. When you're done with your essay, read the rubric and make sure you did everything the rubric says. And if you do that, you'll pass and everyone will be happy. But I'm very strict with this rubric. If I say you must include 3 things, then I must be able to see 3 things. If I say you can't make more than 2 mistakes in spelling, if I see 3 mistakes in spelling, you'll fail that aspect. So pay attention to the rubric, get a feel for how much everything counts. Your essay has 3 questions on it. It should be about 3 paragraphs long, probably 2 to 3 sentences per paragraph, something like that. If you want to go crazy and write 5 pages, that's fine, but it will not get you a better grade. You just have to make sure you've answered the questions in the rubric and move from there. So if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks a lot. Be safe. Have a great day. Bye bye.